Welcome into Locked On Phillies. Today's episode, some huge news for the Philadelphia Phillies front office. President of Baseball Operations Dave Dombrowski is here to stay. We'll break it down in today's Locked On Phillies.
You are Locked On Phillies, your daily Philadelphia Phillies podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, this is Locked On Phillies. I'm your host, Connor Thomas. Been talking Phils baseball for years over on 97.5, The Fanatic on the radio, credentialed member of the Philadelphia Phillies media. Happy to be here with you as your host of Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And some big news that broke on the Phillies front. It's not a free agent. No, it's not. It's not an addition in that matter. It's not a trade. It's not anything that's going to be seen on the field. Technically, we will see the results on the field. And that's President of Baseball Operations Dave Dombrowski has been given a contract extension. So it's a 3-year extension, taking him, this is an important date, through the 2027 season. This means a couple of things, right? Of course, his contract was not yet up. 2027 season means he was here until 2024. So 25, 26, and 27 have been added. And this means a bunch of things and actually has a very interesting effect based on contract situation. So right now the year is, if I'm correct, 2022, I believe, last time I checked. Yeah, we're getting near the end of it, but it is still 2022. So 2027 takes us to a situation where we are now 5 years out. 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. 5 years starting this next season. So more on that in a little bit. But here's why it's a good sign that the decision was made. First of all, Dave Dombrowski seems to be committed to this team, clearly. He's willing to sign that 3-year contract extension on top of already being here till 2024. So the next 5 years of his life are going to be as the president of baseball operations for the Philadelphia Phillies, unless something crazy happens and he's fired. But his job so far would indicate that he will not be. It also means that John Middleton, who saw his baseball team pay into the luxury tax for the first time in the history of the franchise this past season. This is the first time they've ever gone that high. Normally in business, if you're in charge of running an operation and your owner says, hey, man, I really don't want to go into this budget, and you spend the most amount of money that has ever been spent in the history of that company, the owner isn't ecstatic about that. But when you go to the World Series and you come within 2 games of winning it, and you get those type of results, and you have the track record of a guy like Dave Dombrowski, it shows that John Middleton trusts him to spend exorbitant amounts of his money. Just unbelievable amounts of John Middleton's money will be trusted to Dave Dombrowski until 2027. And that shows that John Middleton is perfectly okay with spending, well, as long as this guy is the one doing it. And Dave Dombrowski is committed to being that guy. It's awesome. That relationship between Dombrowski and Middleton will be continuing. It seems like it's in a great spot. It also means that the fate of manager Rob Thompson, who signed a 2-year contract this postseason with the Philadelphia Phillies to be their manager, not just for next year, but for the year after. Well, now you're looking at a situation where when that contract comes up, Dave Dombrowski will still be here. So the evaluation process will be done by the same front office. I'm not sure what Sam Fold's contract situation is as the GM, but keeping this grouping together seems important. And it's also a really good sign because Dave Dombrowski, he reformed the entirety. Sorry, I got a fly near me. I think I just caught it live on YouTube. Go ahead and check that. Is that a fly? Ignore that if you're listening on the podcast because I'm a little distracted there. But as I was saying about the front office, Dave Dombrowski completely revamped the front office structure, the minor league structure as far as minor league scouts, development, everything. You don't see successful organizations have a guy do that and then a year or two later bring somebody else in to try and learn a system that's not theirs. No, sustained success is brought about by keeping important pieces in place. And Dave Dombrowski has made it clear that he agrees with that. John Middleton's willing to pay for that. And that is a perfect pairing for continued success for the Philadelphia Phillies. It helps when the team's certainly in a championship window. So, yeah, that's certainly factored in. But Dave Dombrowski is also a reason they're in this championship window. Look at some of the moves that he made that earned him this deal. Let's start with this year and then work our way back. The trade deadline acquisitions, Brandon Marsh, an absolute 10 out of 10. Just great work by Dave Dombrowski to bring him in here, trusting Kevin Long in your hitting coach to get some work done. You have your center fielder locked up for a while now. Noah Syndergaard pitched some big games for you. He wasn't outstanding, but he was good enough to be what you brought him in here for. An extra starter to bolster the rotation, to get you through October and into November even. And, well, Syndergaard did not about as well as we could expect, because some did expect more from him, myself included, but he got largely the job done. That's a positive acquisition. Noah Syndergaard was a positive acquisition. David Robertson, before injuring his calf, jumping up and down in the playoffs, was a big part of the reason the Phillies bullpen was able to withstand the loss of Corey Knebel late and find a way to make it into the playoffs. So another good acquisition. Last year at the trade deadline, bringing in Kyle Gibson, just that's a signing, or a trade rather, that paid dividends over multiple seasons. I know Kyle Gibson kind of like imploded the back end of this year, but he had some moments over the past couple seasons that made that trade absolutely worth it, especially considering that Spencer Howard was the main part of that trade, and he's done absolutely nothing for the Texas Rangers. So another good trade at the deadline last year. Brought in Freddie Galvis last year, who was didn't quite work out in the manner that we thought, but it was addressing the correct need, right? It's very rare you see a Dave Dombrowski move and you think, why in the world is he doing this? Where does this fit? How does this work? No. He goes out and he makes trades to make this team better. And think about the free agent signings. Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos were two of the highest profile free agents this past year. They're both in Phillies pinstripes because Dave Dombrowski did a great job negotiating with them and getting everything squared away to get that set up. Edmundo Sosa, picked up off of waivers, I believe, from the St. Louis Cardinals organization. And now he's a guy that you could see being a utility infielder for this team for the next 3-4 years. Yeah, I mean, he's going to be a very cheap option, a great backup option. You don't want him to be your starter, but Dave Dombrowski has said we feel comfortable with him there. That's another great acquisition. Dave Dombrowski has been really, really good in his tenure as Philadelphia Phillies president of baseball operations, and now he'll be here through 2027. And I teased you. I said, why is that significant? Well, here's why. There's one. I repeat, one player currently under contract with the Philadelphia Phillies that will be under an actual agreed upon contract in 2027. His name is Bryce Harper. There are a couple of guys like Nick Maton and Brandon Marsh and Andrew Bellotti who will still be arbitration eligible at that time. There are some younger players that could potentially be part of the team that are arbitration eligible still and everything. Who knows what's going on with the call-ups and the Mick Abels and the Andrew Painters and the Griff McGarrys of the world. But of your main core, the only guy who's on a deal that takes him through 2027 is Bryce Harper. You look at Kyle Schwarber and Nick Castellanos and those long deals they got last year. Yeah, they're both done before 2027. Rhys Hoskins up. Aaron Nola up. Zach Wheeler up. Ranger Suarez up. All of these guys are JT Realmuto up. Like, they're going to be forced to re-sign these guys, trade these guys, build this core, change this core. And that's why the 2027 year is significant, because this is basically Dave Dombrowski saying, I see the core we've assembled here. I'm seeing it through. I am staying until these guys are no longer with the team or we've accomplished what we came to do. And that's a discussion for 2027, which who knows where we'll all be at that point. But if I am indeed still doing the Locked On Phillies podcast in 2027, we will have that discussion about, does he stay on? Does he rebuild this team? Well, that's a whole nother discussion. The key is Dave Dombrowski is here to stay for this core at this World Series window, and hopefully he gets a ring or two for his commitment to this organization. And it will be largely thanks to some stuff that he does in the next couple of years and has already done. So a great move by John Middleton and the Philadelphia Phillies by inking Dave Dombrowski to a 3-year contract extension through the 2027 season. Now, that was looking forward. Coming up, we're going to look back. We're going to have our third starting pitching player review. It's going to be one Ranger Suarez in an interesting 2022 season. How did he do, and how does it compare to 2021? Because that is the main question a lot of people ask when you look at Suarez's performance in 2022. We'll break it down next as we continue Locked On Phillies. All right, let me tell you about my friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. You get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer. World Cup going on right now. The USA, a tough draw against Wales yesterday. But hey, a couple more games. They got England Friday. They got Iran next week. Keep an eye on that. BetOnline's got your lines for that. They got esports. They've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, I should be able to say the word podcast. I'm doing one right now. You can find those at BetOnline as well. They're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action, because BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, it's time for another 2022 player review. Now, keep in mind, we're just doing these for the starters defensively, the 5 starting pitchers, and we'll probably do 2 or 3 bullpen pieces. Nothing too crazy. We're not going to give like a review to Odubel Herrera, who's no longer with the team, or Juris Familia, who would get an F. I might do Juris Familia just to give him an F. Is that piling on? Nah, whatever. But we're only doing it for the main contributors to the Philadelphia Phillies. And today, that main contributor that we're breaking down is Ranger Suarez, the young lefty that had great moments in the postseason, not so great moments at the start of the season. And here's how his 2022 season looks when you break it down. He had a total of 155 and 1/3 innings pitched, a 3.65 ERA, 10 wins, 7 losses. Wins and losses, not a huge stat for pitchers, I know. 29 games started. So in 29 starts, he struck out 129 batters, a 1.33 whip, which that's the most troubling number that I see from 2022, right, is the 1.33 whip. Because when I look at what he was really good at in 2021, it was control. He only walked 33 batters over 106 innings. Now he walked 58 batters in 155 and a third innings pitch, which it's not a significant boost in trend, but as you throw more, you expect that command to head in the right direction. It headed in the wrong direction this year. Now, his strikeout per 9 also dipped off. He struck out a total of 107 batters in 106 innings last year. This year, 129 batters in 155 innings. And I think a lot of that was early season struggles. Ranger Suarez, coming from Venezuela, I apologize. Coming from Venezuela, had an issue with his visa for the regular season, or for spring training. Man, I can't talk today. Let's start that over. Ranger Suarez, coming from Venezuela, had trouble with his visa coming into spring training this year. There were issues with COVID. There was issues with the lockout. And he was behind the 8 ball with training. Similar to what we talked about when we did Zach Wheeler's season review, where he was struggling with a shoulder issue. He had a little bit of a sickness at the start of the season, got like a bad flu, and then it took a while for him to warm up. Yeah, Ranger Suarez didn't have that great command at the start, and you just have situations where he misses a good amount of games this year, injuries and the like. So it wasn't an ideal season for Ranger Suarez, but when he was out on the mound, he was what you'd expect, a good young pitcher with room still to grow. Wasn't quite what he was in 2021 when he was a 1.36 ERA and 106 innings pitched. But I also do think some of that is the defense still. You have to look at a situation where you're building a better infield defense, because a lot of the year you had Didi Gregorius playing up the middle, who frankly is not a quality enough defender anymore. Gene Segura is a above average defender, but not an elite one. Bryson Stott was a guy that you weren't sure if he could play shortstop at the major league level coming into this season. So the defense up the middle, coupled with Alec Bohm and Rhys Hoskins at the corners, isn't ideal for a guy like Ranger Suarez, who's a ground ball pitcher. If you go out and get Trey Turner, you could see his numbers be significantly better in 2023. having him and Bryson Stott up the middle, an improved Alec Bohm at third base, and I guess it's going to be Rhys Hoskins at first base again. But that's part of as well why the numbers are not quite where you'd want them to be for Ranger Suarez. But looking at his ability this year, yeah, you know what? He had a. I can't give him too low of a grade this year because in a vacuum for a young pitcher, his only a second time ever throwing a significant amount of innings at the major league level, he took care of business. But the issue is when you compare it to what he did in 2021 in an outstanding season, probably the most undervalued season that we've seen for a Phillies pitcher in a decade. Well, that makes it look like he took a regressive step. And I guess technically he did by the numbers, but when you see young pitchers like this, it's often they do have this kind of roller coaster until they get settled in as a major league pitcher. And Suarez wasn't even like all that bad. I mean, it was just a situation where I don't know what to tell you. He just had a rough start to the year, rough middle part of the year with injuries, and that's it. But his seminal moment of the 2022 season, there's only one possible thing it could be. World Series Game 3. He hits the start, and you go on and you win 7-0 against the Houston Astros. 5 innings pitched, 3 hits, no runs, no earned, 1 walk, 4 strikeouts, no home runs given up. It was just an absolute textbook Ranger Suarez start. He was really, really good in that start. He had moments in the playoffs where he struggled. NLDS Game 1 against Atlanta. NLCS Game 3 against the San Diego Padres wasn't his best performance. Gave up an earned run in that one. 5 innings, 2 hits, 2 runs is nice. But let me read you the most important thing from Ranger Suarez's playoff time that makes me feel really good. Here are his appearances. He made a start against Atlanta in Game 1 of the NLDS. The Phillies won 7-6. He made a start in Game 3 of the NLCS against the San Diego Padres. The Phillies won 4-2. He made an appearance in Game 5, clinched that game out, got the save in that one. The Phillies won 4-3, advanced to the World Series. He made an appearance in Game 1 of the World Series out of the bullpen. The Phillies win that game 6-5. And then he makes a start in Game 3 of the World Series. The Phillies win that game 7-0. Ranger Suarez had 5 World Series appearances, or 5 playoff appearances this year. The Phillies won every single damn one of those games. The moment was not too big for him, and he's going to be a big part of this team moving forward. Maybe bigger than people expect. And maybe that's a podcast at some point in the future where I talk about Ranger Suarez being a huge part of this rotation going forward, because he's kind of the forgotten man in that dead zone between the aces of Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola and the young guns of Andrew Painter and Mick Abel and Griff McGarry and maybe a veteran that you bring in free agency and stuff like that. But Ranger Suarez, I'm going to give a B- for the 2022 season for his final grade. And some people may say that's a little high. Some people may say that's a little bit low. I'm trying to split the difference there because I do think he had moments in the postseason that were awesome, moments in the regular season where he looked lost, and really it's still a young player coming into his own with the Philadelphia Phillies. So Ranger Suarez a B- and a perfect postseason for him. So, well, not totally perfect, but perfect in the win column in his 5 appearances. That's a good sign for big innings in the future from the young Venezuelan lefty. So Ranger Suarez, you get your B- for your 2022 player review. Now, coming up next, we're going to do Off the Poll. We're going to react to this weekend's poll question, which was about free agents that don't play the position of shortstop. And Off the Poll, well, it's a poll question that I asked you over the weekend. You guys all responded. Now I'll share my thoughts on how you responded. We'll do that coming up as we wrap up today's Locked On Phillies. First, I want to tell you about my friends over at Simply Safe, though. It's the holiday season. You're going to have a lot of valuable stuff in your house when you're buying presents, having family over. And over the holidays, property crimes like burglaries and package thefts spike nationally. They go up like crazy. When's the best time to steal something? When people are getting a bunch of Christmas presents delivered. When people are celebrating not paying attention to stuff. When you're away traveling. Maybe you're going somewhere for Thanksgiving. Maybe you're going somewhere for Christmas coming up. You got to make sure your stuff's protected. And that's why you want to order your Simply Safe system today. Oh, you know why else? because you can order it for half off today. They're offering 50% off their award-winning security system so that more families can feel safe and secure this holiday season like my family does. My mom has it at her house, protects her and our family dog to make sure they're all right. All of our possessions over there. Go ahead and check them out. I trust them with my mom's life. That's about as big of an endorsement as I can give. But if you need another endorsement, well, Simply Safe was named the best home security system of 2022 by U.S. News and World Report, the third year in a row that they've had that set up. You can get videos, monitors, all of that stuff, little sensors, 24/7 professional monitoring agents. They use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to make sure they respond as quickly as possible to any potential threats. So don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/UR. Not slash URL. That's a Ron Burgundy moment where I'm just reading the ad read and I don't pay attention. Simplysafe.com/LockedOnMLB. 50% off their biggest sale of the year. What are you waiting for? There's no safe like Simply Safe. All right, it is time for Off the Poll. And Off the Poll, if you're not familiar with it, it's a running segment we do here on Locked On Phillies where on Fridays, I'll ask a poll question. I'll put it out on Twitter at LO_Phillies. I'll also retweet it from at ConnorThomas975, which is my main account. You can see that down on the bottom of the screen if you're watching on YouTube right there. But I don't give you my choice. I just read the question. I don't want to poison the well. I don't want to change your opinion. I want you to give me your unbiased opinion. And then on Monday, I'll tell you where I would have voted and what I think about the results. So without further ado, let's get into our off the poll question for this weekend. I know it's Tuesday. I told you I was a little under the weather yesterday, so had to push back the episode. We will have 5 episodes this week. Just one will be a special Saturday episode. So you get that coming up for your holiday long weekend. So get that all squared away. But the off the poll question for this weekend was, which of these non-shortstop free agent options are you most interested in? The options in order were Masataka Yoshida, Carlos Rodon, Gene Segura, and Craig Kimbrell. So, a couple of interesting things on this. And the reason I put these players in, really, I could have done all starting pitching. I could have done all middle infielders that weren't shortstops. I could have gone all outfielders. There's a bunch of other guys that are potentially available. But I tried to give what I thought to be the top option from each of those different categories: an outfielder, an infielder, a starting pitcher, a relief pitcher. And the runaway winner of this one, as expected, was Carlos Rodon. A lot of people are on the Carlos Rodon hype train, and I totally get it. He's one of the better starting pitchers available. And when you look at the age and the ability and probably the size of the contract, because I know Jacob deGrom is out there. I know Justin Verlander is out there, and we'll see where those guys end up. And they're better pitchers than Carlos Rodon. They absolutely are. But when you factor in age and injury history and everything like that, Carlos Rodon, there's an argument to be made that he may be top of the heap when it comes to value. And the Phillies, well, they need that extra arm. They want to build. I know you are, because I'm tired of going into series, especially this past postseason series run, the World Series. And every time you go into a series, it's like, well, the Cardinals have more depth starting pitching than you. And the Braves have more depth starting pitching than you. And the Padres have more depth starting pitching than you. And the Astros have more depth starting pitching than you. And only one of those series did it come back to bite the Phillies, but it was the World Series. And if you have a guy that you can throw rather than throwing a bullpen game in game 4 of a series or game 3 of a series or even game 2 of a series, that makes you much more formidable. So I would probably go Carlos Rodon as well. The tough news for people who voted that way is that it sounds like, well, Dave Dombrowski is more interested in spending that money elsewhere besides starting pitching. When he said that it may be a depth move for a starter, I take that as it'll probably be a depth move for a starter. But Carlos Rodon, 70% of the vote. Next was Masataka Yoshida with 22.5% of the vote, which I guess this is the breakdown of how much you've heard about these players too, because Masataka Yoshida is just interesting. And I think the big draw there for fans is it's just an international star choosing you, which we don't get very often here in Philadelphia. But he's also an interesting addition, or would be rather, that you'd look to bat over 300, which you don't see quite as often. You see it less and less in the modern game with the shift coming, probably going to be an easier transition to Major League Baseball. You can play corner outfield in place of Bryce Harper, who's getting some type of procedure done coming up. Well, today, really, or tomorrow is when we're looking at it. As 23rd of November will be when everything gets done there. And then Gene Segura, you're looking at 7.5% of the vote. I think that's just the contingent of people who are like, it would be nice to have Gene back, which I feel that way too. But I can't pick him over Rodon if it's just one option. Craig Kimbrell, man, I feel bad, buddy. 0% of the vote for Craig Kimbrell. I guess we're looking at just, hey, when you get to the bullpen, you get to the bullpen. We'll try and shore it up with guys that are bargain veteran guys, and we'll trust the guys we already have held down: Sir Anthony Dominguez, Jose Alvarado, Connor Brogdon, guys like that, Andrew Bellotti, to continue to do what they can do. But yeah, so Rodon, Yoshida, Segura, and Kimbrell not with a single vote in this poll. So that's how it breaks down off the poll and breaks down your preferences of free agent opportunity away from the shortstop position. Fun episode today. It was a lot of fun on Locked On Phillies. I want to thank you one more time for making Locked On Phillies your first listen every day. We're always free and available wherever you get your podcast, YouTube, Odyssey app, all that good stuff. Make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. Locked On Sports Today is covering the big news from around sports. They've got your breaking news, the biggest stories of the day. Check out all their great work to keep you updated. It's your news cycle, so check them out. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, just like Locked On Phillies. So give them a listen. Do a great job over there on Locked On Sports Today. That's all my time, and I will talk to you tomorrow on the next episode of Locked On Phillies.